Call the Urban Design Commission meeting to order. And before I embark on any of my sworn duties, I would ask that you please turn your attention to Stefan from the city's IT department. He's going to share some important information with regard to the virtual meeting.
All right, thank you. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their name if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Can I get a motion for approval of minutes? Okay, Russell, seconded by Jessica. Thank you very much. The next item is the item number 1, public comment. Julie, I did not see any registrants for that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, let's move on to disclosures and recusals. Any concerns this afternoon? See no hands. Thank you. Okay, Kevin, it's time for our agenda overview.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly walk through the items on tonight's agenda. The first item is 4909 Whitcomb Drive. It's a CDR request. There are no issues from planning and zoning staff, and staff is recommending possible improvement on the consent agenda unless members of this body would like to discuss this one further. Item 3 is 917 Williamson Street, and it is the report of the facade grant team. Again, the facade grant team has met and has recommended approval of this one, and staff also believes this is a consent agenda candidate if no members of the body wish to discuss this one. Item 4 are facade changes on 101 North Hamilton Street. This includes the repainting of an already painted brick facade and the inclusion of new openings along the side of that building. Staff would note that this item is a city-approved landmark, and the Landmarks Commission previously granted a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed modifications. Staff does not have any issues or concerns with that item. Item 5 is a project at Milwaukee Street, Windstone Drive. And this is a residential building complex that was approved back in 2019. This body last saw it in 2020. This is an advisory opinion from the UDC as referred to by the Planning Division Director. Staff will do a brief overview before that item begins. And the final item tonight is an informational presentation at the corner of Johnson, Bassett, and Conklin Place. A 12-story building is proposed. And again, that's an informational presentation. Chair, that is what I have for tonight's agenda overview.
Okay, thank you. Per the agenda overview, we heard that there were 2 recommendations for consent and another one that the staff had no comment on. So I'm just wondering if there are any nominations for consent agenda. Shane?
Hello. Hello. I just wanted to make note, Chair, of my attendance. I came in a couple minutes late, but then I would also like to move to make item number 2 and 3 on the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Is that a second, Lois?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion for those 2 items? Okay.
Chair, it does look like we have someone registered to speak on item number 2. I just wanted to mention that, and 3 actually.
In opposition or support?
No, support.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, seeing no other comment, I'm just going to lower your hand, Shane, in case there's any others. An objection? Seeing no objection, by unanimous consent, items number 2 and 3 are approved. If you're here for items number 2 or 3, you are approved unless you still would like to speak for some reason. If you would like to speak, please contact Stefan. Otherwise, you're free to go and enjoy the afternoon. That brings us then to item number 4. Also, in addition to Shane, I'd like to welcome Rafiq also.
Registered to speak on item 4 is Emily Mader-Kiley, representing Angus Young Associates.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Mader-Kiley with Angus Young Associates. I just wanted to give a brief overview of this project so everyone kind of has an idea of our thought process behind it. So this is an existing landmarks building. We did work tirelessly with the landmarks to kind of get them to approve this. It's a existing painted sandstone building in Madison. It's been neglected for many, many years. So the new owner, Greg Thomas, is looking to upgrade the exterior facade as well as doing some major renovations on the inside in hopes to get 1 to 2 new tenants in this building. So on the facade, really this building only had the front that was designed. The East Mifflin facade has always been pretty plain with not much care taken to it. So we were hoping to bring some life back to that East Mifflin facade, considering it is a heavily populated area, lots of pedestrian traffic. And it can also be seen from the Capitol. So bringing this back to life, I think, is going to be just good in general for the area. We really wanted to add some new openings in this facade to bring some more light in this building. The upstairs and the downstairs are pretty dark in this area. So the hopes are to draw tenants in with some new openings that have Capitol views while also allow light going into there. We're sticking with a paint color that mimics the original sandstone color. So it shouldn't be too much of a different appearance from kind of what it is now and similar to what it used to be back in its glory days. Since it's been painted for so many years, it would be impossible to remove the current paint without severely damaging the building. So we're hoping to still make it look like its historical roots, but also bring it a fresh look. We are keeping one of the original openings, which you can see on detail number 2 there. The left-hand side, the second floor window, that is an original window. So we are keeping that window and just repairing it. So we are keeping the only historic window on there. All the other windows have been replaced with retrofit windows throughout the years. And we plan to upgrade those with new similar looking windows that are not rotting and decaying. And we also plan to, with the paint, kind of highlight the original features of the building, which would be the window sills and the window headers, which are now have kind of been lost in the various coats of paint on the building. So we're hoping to paint those a different color to kind of bring it back to its historical roots, where you could differentiate between those two materials. Otherwise, we are replacing a non-historic door for a new one. Both of the new ones on the East Mifflin side, so they match the front door. Right now, there is a hollow metal door there right now that's in pretty rough shape. And then the door next to it in the front is also in pretty poor condition. And towards on the southeast elevation there, we do have a window opening that is currently filled in with plywood that we are planning to remove the plywood and fill it in with brick. Landmarks was keen that they wanted to be able to still see that there was a window there, but it had been removed. So we're filling it in with brick since that is going to be a staircase down to the basement. So there's really no need to have glass there. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. Otherwise, yeah, we're really just adding some paint and a banner. The East Mifflin facade, the idea behind it is the East Mifflin facade is a secondary facade. And in its historical nature, the thought from the Landmarks Commission was at some point, if this was going to be developed into a side of the building, which it originally wasn't built to be designed for, the front part of the building would have looked slightly different than the second half of the building, since they were built at two different times. The front portion, the sandstone portion, is the original, and then that second back portion was an addition at some point. So we did try to vary the two different facades so you can distinguish between the original sandstone building versus the new added brick addition in the back.
Is that it?
Yep, that's all I have. And if anyone has questions, feel free to let me know.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Any questions or comments? Lois?
I'm wondering, are you intending, I see the proposed signage, and this isn't a signage request, but are you intending to do any awnings? A lot of the examples you have around the square have awnings, and that's where their signage is?
So at this point in time, no, we aren't proposing any awnings. This obviously we will have to resubmit our signage when we know the tenants, but we did submit renderings with a blade sign that Landmarks liked the idea of that, doing something like that. They really wanted to keep this building to its time, which they felt that blade signage were fit in with the area, while also paying tribute to the historical nature, which did have a protruding sign originally. It's been a lot of things, but it did have a protruding sign, not exactly like that, but similar protruding sign back in the day. So at this point, this is basically all we're proposing in terms of signage, pretty minimal, just this blade sign at the front, and then another sign in the rear on East Mifflin above the door, where we have that band.
Okay, thank you.
Rafiq?
No, I think it's pretty good. I don't know that there will be too many comments, so I see Shane put his hand up, so I'll hold my motion until after Shane goes.
Okay, Shane?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify one thing on the headers and the sills. Are you replacing those with a cast stone element, or are you just painting them a slightly different color?
Yeah, so we're not replacing any of the original headers. We're not touching them. We're simply repainting them on the front facade and the East Mifflin facade. And then the new windows, we will be adding new cast stone to match, obviously, since there isn't anything there. One of the new windows on the second floor, it's hard to see in this picture, but if you kind of zoom in, there is an existing opening that was on the second floor at one point. Nope, on the second floor. Yep, right over to the left a little bit on the front portion of the building. Yep, there was an existing door there at one point. So it's hard to see in the picture, but there is a header there that is original to the building that we would be reusing for one of the new windows. But all the other new windows would have new cast stone and new brick headers.
Okay, and that's good, I think. I just wanted to make sure you were reusing any of the historic headers and sills where they were present. And then my last question was maybe to get opinion or perspective from my fellow commissioners about the brick infill of that one window. I certainly think it's an improvement over the wood boarded up infill. And I acknowledge and know that there's the staircase behind it, but sometimes it still can be a neat detail to have the window in front of the stairs, but it comes with some maintenance. So guess I pose that as a question for my fellow commissioners, how they feel about the brick infill.
Okay, thank you. How do you feel, Jessica?
Actually, I wasn't raising my hand about that, but personally, I think windows with a stair behind them are more interesting than boarded up brick. This is a little weird of an opening because it's taller than the window to the left in this image. So it's not like things line up anyway. It's kind of an oddity on its own. So if anything, I kind of question making the header and the sill a different color if it's not going to be a window. That's it. But I had another comment when it's my time.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the strip there where it says signage, is that a material or is that paint?
So we're proposing a composite material there that would kind of wrap that area. So it's not actually painted. We would try to match the color of the paint, but
okay,
we're proposing it just to be like a kind of a typical signage backer. But instead of making that band part of our signage package, we're including it in our exterior package. So then we would just submit the lettering at that time.
I just wondered on this image right here, if that band shouldn't return on that 90 degree, that little portion that's the step out right there, down lower so it'd be parallel with where it said signage.
You're talking about having that band wrap it?
Mm-hmm.
No, we did have that originally. Landmarks had taken that off.
Okay.
Because they really wanted to differentiate the two areas, and they wanted it to be. They said back in the historical roots of the building, they probably would have used a piece of wood and just nailed it into the facade with a signage board, as their signage backer. They wanted us to try to mimic that. Obviously, we don't want to use wood since it's a pretty big maintenance issue. So we were looking at using a more composite material for that signage banner. But yeah, we're just having it on the front, so it appears to be just a signage banner. And I can quickly comment too on the window. So I guess the reasoning, and the owner is happy to add a window if need, like add a window there. That's something that we've kind of been back and forth on. But painting the header and the sill was something Landmarks had requested because they wanted it to. They said in its historical nature, again, it would have been a window and that would have been differentiated. So they really wanted it to stand out that there was an opening there at one point.
That makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, it is a weird detail for sure. But we would be happy to add the window in. And I'm not sure Landmarks would oppose that either. I'm not sure.
Is that it, Jessica? Christian?
Yeah, I'm glad Shane brought that up about the window, because that was really the only thing on this project that really jumped out at me. And I guess I didn't really see in my packet of materials all the comments from Landmarks and stuff. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see that was included. But that window just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I understand the desire to, keep historical aspects of the building, and certainly the current, boarded up with a sheet of plywood, is tacky and not really appropriate. But I'm not sure making the jump to replacing that plywood with brick and still obviously where a window was is the right choice. So if they are amenable to having a window there, I think that would be the better choice. I don't really, I get it, I guess, but I just don't agree with the value of the historical context of a ghost window that you can clearly see is, bricked over. I don't understand that thought process. I'm sure the landmarks people would argue with me on that, but that just aesthetically rubs me the wrong way.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm sure landmarks wouldn't care about adding the window. I'm sure they'd be happy to. I guess the original reason we didn't was for security reasons, but we kind of moved away from that because the owner and I also feel that it does look odd. So we're happy to change that out and get landmarks to back that, which shouldn't be an issue at all.
And what are we going to see with this window that everybody wants?
What are you gonna?
When we look into the building, is it going to be a back stair, with a fluorescent light?
I mean, that might be something we want to talk about. In my opinion, it would make sense to have it be something like spandrel glass. The stair that window looks into is a basement stair, a basement wooden stair. The basement is being used as storage, so there's absolutely no glam to that stair at all. Mm-hmm. So it might make sense to make it a spandrel or a tinted glass.
Well, I guess I would suggest you just put a sympathetic looking window blind in there and leave it closed.
Yeah. Yep. That could work too.
Tom.
Thanks, Cliff. Barring an unsightly view, I would endorse the window versus the bricked in. And I had a question. If you can go back to that same view, the same perspective we were looking at that had the window and the Mifflin Street side of the building. I just had a question about the molding trim that. Oh my goodness, where'd it go? All right, we're getting there. Okay, wait, you can see it here. You can see across the where the sort of the belt line cuts between the first and second floor on the front of the building, and also on the newer portion in the back. There was like what looks like a crown molding along there, but it does not seem to continue along the side of the older portion of the building. Is there a reason that's eliminated there? It would seem like that ought to be continuous if it's going to be front and then way back. Or did Landmarks have some comment on that?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, Landmarks had, like I said, we worked with Landmarks back and forth for a while, even before submitting. So that was something they had removed. So our original design did have that band going all the way continuously throughout the whole building. But they really wanted us to make a point that in its original form, really this building was designed only to have that front facade, which is obviously the only designed part of this building. And they really didn't want us to try to add anything ornate to the East Mifflin side, since in its original form, it wasn't intended to have anything ornate. So they wanted us to keep that band, but simplify it as we have shown. And then they were okay with us reintroducing it at the back of the building, since that was an addition. And if that back portion would have been designed in its time, that ornate feature might have made sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
so if it was shabby, it has to remain shabby.
Yeah, I guess that's that. The fact that it reasserts itself at the back portion, it just feels like there's something missing. So
trust me. Yeah, it's been a long haul with this building. Our original design was 100% different than what we currently have shown.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we had a gray scheme going on, but yeah, this has kind of got simplified down to this. We were just grateful because there were some commissioners that wanted it to be as is. So we are grateful to get this approved.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, I appreciate the explanation. Thank you for.
Yeah, I'm sorry it doesn't maybe make sense, but.
Point well taken.
Kevin, you had your hand raised there.
Oh, okay. Am I unmuted? Sorry. realize.
Yes.
I just wanted to provide a clarification or in regard to the landmarks approval. And if, depending on how the motion of the body goes, I just have some thoughts about how motion could be structured in case so we don't run into a conflict between the landmarks action and the Urban Design Commission action, but I'll wait until there's a motion.
And before there is a motion, and I know that Rafiq promised to make one, I just have one other comment, and that has to do with this view here where, I presume there's going to be a mullion between the top of the door and the arched window. It looks like from the building elevations that while all the other windows are kind of detailed with additional meeting rails and mullions, that these two arched windows are just one big piece of glass. And I would request, you continue a horizontal mullion on the other two windows where the arch springs.
So these windows are actually remaining as is.
Oh, they are.
So that's what is currently there.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know. There's not very many historical pictures of this building. I'm assuming these windows aren't original considering they're not rotted, but they might be. But yeah, these rounded windows are not changing.
Okay. Thank you. You still want to make a motion, Rafiq?
Sure, I will move for approval.
Okay. Would your motion include or not include the window in place of the brick infill?
I mean, I didn't care about it, but if you guys care about it, we can add that. It looks like everybody's nodding their head. So sure, let's make that a window with some, what do we call them? Chinky blinds, or what was the word?
Oh, sympathetic.
Some sympathetic blinds, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a second on the motion? Jessica, okay. Oh, wait a minute, Kevin?
And I just food for thought for the commission, because I'm looking at the notes from the landmark meeting, and those were linked in the staff report in terms of the notes from their discussion. But I don't know if this would in any way run counter to their motion. So I'm just wondering if the will in checking with the preservation planner and consistency with the already granted C of A. Would this commission have a different motion if this was found to be not consistent with the COA and would open up a further review by the Landmarks Commission? I'm just wondering if there's any flexibility or any desire to have flexibility in that motion, that if it turns out that this is counter to the certificate of appropriateness granted by Landmarks, then it could proceed as proposed. That's the will of the body. I just want to throw that out there.
So you must be referring specifically to the window.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Because that's the only exception. And the applicant had it sounded like in working with Landmarks that was not objectionable.
Yeah, I don't think they would object to the window. I know we've been talking to Heather for many months, and I know she is okay with the window. I obviously can't speak for the whole commission because it's not always that they all are on the same page. But in speaking to Heather, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I don't know if Heather could just approve it and update the COA, or if it would have to be looked at by the rest of the commission.
Okay.
But I don't foresee it being an issue.
All right. So maybe we can just amend the motion to say that if there are significant objections with regard to the window and the stairwell, that the Landmarks Commission's decision should be final. Is that all right with everybody? Okay. So seeing no hands for any further discussion, by unanimous consent, you have approval. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks. Okay. Then that brings us to our old buddy, Brian Munson. on item number 5, which is a project that we've seen a couple times on Milwaukee Street on the Far East Side.
Well, thanks, Cliff. Again, Brian Munson. What we'd like to do tonight, we first have RJ Pasquesi from KCG kind of give a little bit of an introduction as to why we're here tonight, and then we'd like to break out the details into 2 different presentations. So if RJ is on and could lead things off, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, Brian, this is RJ. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, and appreciate the opportunity here to kind of present our request to you guys this evening. As Brian mentioned, my name's RJ Pasquesi. I am the president of KCG Companies, and we are the owner of the Meadowlands project. And as Brian mentioned, really, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about why we're here today, and then kind of set the stage for then Brian and Andy to walk you through our specific requests. So let's get right to it. So why are we here? So the project, the Meadowlands, so far has seen a cost overrun of $5 million. And this has been a result of 2 main items. One being the grade change as a result of the gas pipeline that was incorrectly located through our diligence and review process. And then 2, the material cost increases that I'm sure you guys have heard about from everybody through COVID. I want to remind this group, this is an affordable housing deal. So we do not have the ability to raise our rents, to put on more debt to cover this cost increase. We have to find other ways and avenues of covering this cost increase. And I want to tell you, we've spent a lot of time and exhausted all other avenues at this point, both at the city level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level, unfortunately to no avail. And so our team has spent a lot of time reviewing the design of this community in a way that we can try to reduce some of these costs while still maintaining the integrity, the marketability, and the key design elements of this community. And I want to thank staff for the time that they have spent with us reviewing a lot of the options that we...
You're wasting your 3 minutes, RJ.
Okay, thank you. So, but I want to thank them for that. And so tonight we're going to present to you 7 items for discussion. We are going to call it a menu of items. We realize our hope is you guys approve all of them. We realize that might not be the case, but we hope on the ones that you guys have concerns with, that we can have a discussion about them, that maybe we can find an alternative solution or a compromise on them that helps us to find some savings. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to talk about the first 5 items on our list for your review.
All right, then. Thank you, RJ. Kevin, if you could switch to the second page, I'll jump right in. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to just quickly try to introduce items 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7 from the memo and walk through where they are on the site and what's proposed. And then Andy will be picking up items 2 and 4, which we anticipate will need some additional discussion. RJ, as RJ mentioned, we've been working very closely with staff, and this list has already been whittled down. There were several items that we got feedback from that we are have taken off the table based on that working relationship. So to jump right in, page 2 is the existing site plan. So if you go to the next slide, please. The first item would be looking at the secondary entrances for the buildings and looking to find ways to simplify the expression architecturally as well as the components of that. Next slide. Here you can see an example of what we are proposing in general terms. And this happens in several points around the building, but effectively all on the side entrance of the building, which is the least utilized entrance of the building, mostly an egress entrance. So what we're proposing to do would be to simplify the roof components of this, simplify the massing of this down, still maintain the access, still maintain the pedestrian entrance and the railings and components that go along with that. Next slide, please. So here you can see kind of a side view of what that would look like. So again, removing the roof and some of the structure components of those entrances to create a more streamlined entrance sequence. Next slide, please. Item 3 would be looking at the storefront. So on building 4 on the north end, we have space for human services in support of both this project as well as other projects. So we have a supply, we'll be working with a nonprofit contractors to offer services to our residents and the neighborhood. And so what we're proposing to do in this case, next slide, please, is to transition from a more storefront expression to something that's a little more in keeping with the residential expression. We would still have the door and the windows, but just a simplified expression in this location. Next slide, please. Item 5 has to do with the exterior unit lighting. In designing the building, there were decorative sconces placed in multiple positions around the patios. And in looking at the delivery of lights, we're able to then instead have some lighting in the ceiling of the porches. So there still will be light, but we would be eliminating or proposing to eliminate some of the sconces along the facades. We would retain some of the sconces that would be decorative at building entries. So we'll still have the same light components, just a simplified proposal to deliver that. Item number 6, please, with next slide. This looks at the common patio space. Originally, we had, you can jump to the next slide, you can see before and after, a patio that stepped down the slope in multiple terraces. And in an effort to try to recognize some of the savings on that, we're proposing a smaller patio all at one level. So we still have a usable open space out here, but would just not be as complex of a construction as the previously approved patio. Next slide, please. The final element that I'll touch on before I turn it over to Andy is the landscape. When we went back and looked for cost saving opportunities, we wanted to make sure that the landscape plan was kind of taking another close look at. So we still have foundation plantings throughout the project that would meet the point system, but doing it in a simplified delivery. So we went from, if you go to the next slide, you can see areas where we had double rows of smaller plants to maybe some larger species plants in a single row. So still a well-designed landscape plan that would go all around the entire building, but a different approach under the lens of trying to simplify the costs on it. So with that, again, this is as RJ mentioned, this is kind of a menu approach. It's comparable to what we've done. If you're for the committee members that were on the committee for the B block, just to the south of this site, a comparable thing. But really the challenge here being the focus on affordability kind of left us in a position where we have to try to recognize some savings to help offset some of the unexpected costs. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy to talk about items 2 and 4.
Thank you, Brian. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Andy Wilson with KCG Design Services. Thanks for having us today on the agenda. I have handled items number 2 and 4 of our memo. These are the items that staff had the most concern and wanted the most conversation about these items. We've segregated them to the end of the list for that reason, and also that they represent the largest amount of relief in our overall package in terms of economic savings to the project and benefiting the development, bringing this project forward. So item number 2, next slide please, is the ramp at Human Services on the north end of building 4. This affects one location on the project. Next slide please, we'll see a comparison. The approved plan has a switchback style accessible ramp on the north end connecting from the accessible sidewalk to the Human Services space on the north end. Since the approved design and the grade changes that RJ mentioned, this required run of ramp has grown 50% from about 80 feet in its original configuration to now 120 feet of run. In lieu of this ramp at the location in the proposed design, we will have signage that routes people from the accessible parking area through the main building front door, which is shown on the dash line, the dark dash line on the proposed plan, through the main building front door into a secondary door of the Human Services space, which is not an uncommon arrangement for an accessory use like this. On the elevation slide, you can see the switchback ramp there on the north end occupying a pretty large portion of the building. And then we would replace that where the ramp was proposed with typical foundation wall, thin stone veneer, and foundation plantings as shown, very much in character with the rest of the building. So given that the grade changes here were kind of unforeseen, that the proposed elevation is in character, we believe, with the rest of the approved building, The ramp is not really a stylistic element. It's more of a functional one. The ramp, importantly, is not required by code nor accessibility standards, and that we're providing an accessible route to the same program and the same architectural space that we were proposing to provide. We ask approval of this item number 2. Item number 4, please. Next slide. This is the private entrances, associated walkways, staircases, and retaining walls. This on the next slide shows where it affects all ground floor units on buildings 1 through 4. We are keeping the private ground floor entrances on the townhome building number 5. So 40 total units are affected. We could go to the next slide. I've concentrated on this area as an example. The proposed staircases here are from the east side of building 4, and then this is the proposed, or this is the approved plan, and the next slide would be a comparison of removing. So removing the private walks, the stairs, and the associated retaining, replacing with already approved foundation wall materials and foundation plantings. Design alternatives were studied to compensate for removing these walks in this area. Shared walks or entrances at the end just mean more retaining walls, which sort of negates the benefit of the cost savings. I think that these areas that are most prominent on this building number 4, unfortunately, are also the most extensive in terms of elevation changes that were exacerbated throughout the process here. So they actually are the most expensive private entrances to build. So in that case, I would say the argument for taking them away is stronger in this case. Given the affordable nature of this project, that we cannot raise rents to benefit the amenity of a private entrance on these ground floor units, that staff supports potential removal of some of these stairs. We ask for approval or at least discussion of this item number 4.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, so we've got 7 items. And before we open it up to the commission, I believe Kevin wanted to say a few words to us. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think I was going to just do a quick overview just because of the menu approach that I think was covered by the development team adequately. But I just wanted to just note process-wise where this one is at in the Urban Design Commission's role, and then perhaps expand a little bit on some of the comments the development team made. This was approved as a PD, Plan Development Zoning, and under that, the Urban Design Commission was an advisory body. UDC is again advisory on this one. And because most of the proposed changes are design related, after submittal of the minor alteration, the code allows the planning division director to refer this item for the UDC for an advisory opinion. So I would note that that would be the action tonight would be an advisory recommendation tonight. In terms of structuring that, this again, you considering the menu approach, the Urban Design Commission can recommend approval. Can recommend approval with conditions or not recommend approval on each of the items. And in fact, staff would prefer that any recommendation specifically handles each item 1 through 7 individually. As noted by the applicant, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the points that staff had raised. In regards to the first item that talked about the individual entries, staff did note that on one of the buildings, 2 of the entries that are proposed for removal also included the removal of windows, and these are also street-facing entries. Some of these buildings have less prominence than others, and I think that's just an important consideration that staff wanted to note for the commission. In regards to the other 2 items, staff does have concern about the functionality about regarding the removal of the ramp and routing that that entrance through the building itself, just programmatically understanding that this is going to serve residents potentially outside of the building. It's a community services office that would serve not only residents of that floor of that building, but outside. So that was a concern staff had raised as noted by the development team. And then finally, the last item, the one that's up on the screen right now, item 4, staff believes this is a very significant change to the overall character of the building and removing that. And again, staff, as noted in the staff report, had suggested potentially maintaining all but maybe the few entrances have the most grade change, or removing this on the non-street facing side as an alternative to removing all of them. But again, that's for the consideration of the commission. Finally, one item I just wanted to note this afternoon, we did receive comments from the District Alder. Those were uploaded to Legistar later this afternoon. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the comments from Alder Lemmer that came in earlier today on this item. So Chair, that's all I had as far as an overview at this time, but certainly available to answer questions as they come up.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So I think my suggestion is we tackle these one at a time. I know that maybe some of them are related, say 2 and 3 are somewhat related. That would be the ramp at the Human Services plus the storefront redesign at Human Services. But I think just to manage this, if we were to go 1 through 7 with a motion and an advisory recommendation, I think it would be the clearest way to let staff know the commission's direction. So let's start on item number 1. The building, I guess they are the secondary entrances. Is there any comment or questions regarding the redesign of those elements? And again, if not, I think we can entertain a motion for that item, knowing that we're going to revisit the rest of the 6 further down the agenda. Tom.
I'd move to approve that motion, that number 1.
Okay. Is there a second on that? Jessica? Okay, and Lois, all right. Okay, seeing no hands raised, then by unanimous consent, we approve item number 1. That brings us to the ramp, the switchback ramp at Human Services. Probably not an aesthetic problem, but there is some functional and access issues that have been cited here because of the potential for users outside of the complex to have to get into that space. Lois.
I had a question about that. Did you say that based on what was approved, that the difference between grade and finished floor actually increased? Or is it, I wasn't quite sure because the elevations aren't shown on the drawings.
Andy?
Yes, thank you. The grade from the approved drawings to now has increased, correct?
By how much? What is the grade difference from start of the ramp to finished floor?
I believe it's another 16 or 18 inches, which required almost another, like, whatever that would be in terms of 1 inch in 12.
18 feet.
Okay, because this is the one that troubles me the most for accessibility, especially if it's serving more the neighborhood at large. Are folks able to get in easily? What is the process? Is it just the route and they can get in easily, or is it?
Yep, we would
doorbell
just like visiting the leasing office. Like if a prospective tenant was visiting during business hours or visiting during a pre-planned event, they would be able to come in that same way and navigate through the building on the accessible route in the hallway. So there would not be an issue. We will have electronic access control that can be programmed so that no one needs a credential to get in when they're supposed to be there.
And are they walking past, like once you enter the building, are you going past a lot of living units, or is it community space?
You would go through the main lobby, past the leasing office, and then past a hallway with about 3 units on either side to the north end of the building to get into and the door for Human Services would be visible from the lobby at the very end of the hallway. So you'll see your destination throughout the trip.
Okay.
Will there be public parking then closer to the building entrance versus the Human Services entrance for, I should say, disabled parking stalls, so to minimize that path?
Yeah, the accessible parking spaces are right at the closest location, actually, which is midway between the main entrance of the building and the Human Services entrance. So the route either direction is the same after you get out of your car.
So it doesn't look like you even have the real estate there to add 18 feet to a ramp.
I believe the drawing we are showing shows the ramp after we figured out what we would need, including the increase. So the file drawings, the approved drawings, have a single switchback, and the drawings we're showing today have a double switchback with a 90-degree bend to get the last run that we need.
That's all my questions for that one.
Okay, Shane and then Russell.
Yeah, I was simply going to request if we could pull up that slide that showed the accessible path, because I personally don't have any issue with the distance between the accessible stalls where they're kind of indicating them or proposing that they go, and then the entry to the building seems pretty intuitive and straightforward. It's more, so that's kind of the exterior. I think it's more about how much you're doubling back than inside the building. But a double switchback on a ramp is not an ideal situation in, an accessibility perspective anyway. So I'm not a huge fan of that solution as it is, especially if it's not required.
Kevin, the plan that Shane's looking for would be page 15 of the presentation, shows what would be required and what would be proposed.
Not sure if Kevin is indisposed, but while we're waiting, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. It's unfortunate the where we are. I question whether this would have been designed very differently, knowing that a very much a public entrance, especially an entrance for people who don't live in the building, would have been accommodated in a different way. I do have some concerns about basically forcing these particular visitors through this residential hall, and also exposing the residents of that residential hall to these public visitors that might be visiting this office. So kind of appreciative of hearing Shane speak to that ramp isn't maybe an ideal situation anyway, but I personally see this as a detriment, this change, proposed change, and I'd like to see it stay in. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Tom.
Thanks. Just a quick question. What is the sort of the relative size of the leasing office compared to the Human Services office? And could at some point in time they be swapped? Would the one would need much less access, I would assume, over time once the buildings are fully leased, but the Human Services is going to need that access. Is that a possibility? I don't know what the square footages are because I'm not looking at the floor plans.
Right. So I think operationally, when we are switching out of lease up mode and into property management mode, we would still want to have that available for building staff at the central location near the front entrance. So it's more, I guess the name of it, I probably should have said management office as opposed to leasing office, although, because both activities will take place out of that same space.
So in your mind, it's a permanent office space, not something where demand would go down after the buildings are fully occupied.
Yes, that's correct.
Even so, I still might consider it.
It's possible that we could find another location within the building, but I think having it on the end there makes sense, especially if other commissioners have a sense of not wanting to mix visitors to the Human Service office and the residents.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Before we move on to the storefront issue of that same area, I think we should provide staff with an advisory recommendation on this one. Russell?
Well, I'm trying to foresee where we might go on number 3 because I think these things are very related, but trying to hash these out individually, I would propose a motion to deny this proposed change. Keep the switchback ramp as shown and approved. I just feel I'm projecting that we're going to suggest to keep the storefront because I think that's going to read as much more of a public entrance. I think the switchback being located at that very public appearing entrance is very clear for visitors who are in a wheelchair or who need that ramp, just to know where they're trying to go and not forcing them back through this pretty far entrance to another part of the building. So my motion is to deny the change. Thank you.
Okay, is that a second, Lois? Okay. So the motion is for denial, seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Christian, I'm sorry, I saw you're unmuted, but you didn't have your hand raised. So, all right, so I see no hands raised. Okay, so now I see Jessica's hand raised. No, it's not raised.
Yeah, I just would want to take a vote on it, please.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So then all in favor of the motion for denial, please.
I do have a question.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Rafiq.
So this is before us because of financial limitations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like the presenters are saying that in order to make this project happen, they have to cut back somewhere. They simply can't afford all of the designs, a typical VE exercise.
Right.
I guess this question is to the client. Are you saying that if you do not VE this project does not continue because you just can't afford it?
RJ, are you still on to take that one?
Yeah, sorry. Yep, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would not, no, that is not what we are saying. What we are committed to this deal, but it is this particular grant, just for your reference, is $150,000. Right? That's we're committed to the project. We're going to make it happen, but we're hopeful we can get some savings here, so not all of it is having to come directly out of our pocket to make this happen for an affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay, any follow-up to that, Rafiq?
I wish the answer was the other way around, because I am a huge proponent for affordable housing, but I am not a proponent of affordable housing that looks cheap and is minus all types of accent and luxury type finishes. I don't think affordable housing should look just basic and plain. And so when you start to strip elements of design that make it nice, you go into that realm of you just got a shelter, and I don't like that. So I don't know. So I don't know what to think now.
Well, I believe this particular item is more about function and than it is about aesthetics on that big, huge switchback ramp. Although there certainly are other ones we're going to be talking about that fall into the category that you're talking about, Rafiq.
All right. I didn't mean just the ramp particularly, but I mean overall, like moving the sconces and then taking out the entries and all of that other stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Then let's see. So we still have a motion seconded, and we're discussing it. Lois and then Jessica.
Well, this is, I think, advisory too, right? Right. I mean, we're trying to make judgments on all of these and prioritize. And in particular, this one I feel is there's some inequality. It doesn't. I don't like to have the ADA entrance kind of circuitous through and past. I don't think it's fair to the tenants on that floor or the people that need it. I think in some low-income housing, I think we also tend to see a higher incidence of folks needing a ramp. People that can't work because they're, they can't. And so even walkers and wheelchairs, I do feel strongly that this would impact more people than a typical, why it's not necessary for code. I think that this is not only, it's going to be used more, I think, than it wouldn't be.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
Yeah, I guess it's a little hard because we're not balancing the budget here, but if it comes down to like, do we give up the ramp or do we give up private entrances? I'd rather give up the ramp than the private entrances. But my thought on this too is that that's a bear of a ramp, and I'm lucky enough that I don't need to use the ramp, but I question if it's better that you would actually go up a shorter ramp and then be inside. And even though you're going past some private stuff, if that's actually a preferable route anyway, that ramp is taking up so much room. And I'm wondering about snow and ice and maintenance. It just looks like, there might be times where if you had that double turn ramp that people wish they had a simpler way to get in than that ramp. So I question really needing it. That's all.
Thank you.
If it's worth maybe going through a private hallway, though, I hear, to have an equitable experience to people who don't use the ramp. It's not the same experience entering, but that ramp is a beast.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote on the motion? Okay. We will vote on the motion. We're not.
Thank you.
You ready to vote, Russell?
Discussion.
Oh.
I feel, Jessica, that this alternate solution that has been proposed is still an option. If there are days that there is just an incredible ice storm that cannot be managed, it appears that there is still some alternative route into the building for these people. So, I just would suggest that. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to vote. So again, it's for denial. All those in favor of the motion to deny removal of the ramp, please signify by raising your hand. Are you seeing that? Okay, Kevin? I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
That's I believe. So let's just so Commissioner Deschamps, Assad, Harper, Knudsen, Ron Otto.
Right.
Is that the 5? Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to lower the hands. Lower the hands. All the hands are lowered. Okay. All those opposed to the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Okay. Okay, so the motion passes. The advisory motion for keeping the ramp. That then brings us to item number 3, which is the storefront changes. There you go. Thank you, Kevin. So we can see what's proposed. We can see what was there originally. We can see the ramp. You can imagine the ramp now without the additional storefront. Any discussion or questions with regard to the reduced glass area here? Christian.
It seems to me like there's kind of room for compromise here. You have one with windows flanking the door and one with the door all by itself, and the one side replaced by a smaller window. I'm not an architect like most of you folks are, but it just seems like there's room for something a little more concise in design, but with some cost savings in getting to something that advertises itself as a office destination, as opposed to just looking like some type of residential entrance, which I think could be confusing to people. So I guess I would throw my hat in for a compromise solution.
Okay, Lois?
Is there the plan to sign this clearly, to express what it is versus entry into the apartments?
Let Andy field that one.
Yes, there will be signage likely at the parking and on the building at the entrance level. So up at the level of the door.
Yeah, and I think in light of that, I'm not concerned as much about the windows. I think that it's more of an aesthetic thing that as long as it's clearly signed and people know what that is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Russell?
I'm jumping ahead a little bit to number 5 only because I'm concerned how we're going to track all the different types, but I do believe it's proposed to remove the decorative sconces. Is that correct for this entrance as well? Andy?
No, that is not correct. That is shown here where the sconce that's shown on the approved left-hand drawing is removed, but we would not, because this is a entrance to a public entrance and not just like a egress stairwell entrance or exit, we would keep those.
Okay. Thanks. I'm agreeing with Christian. There does seem to be an opportunity here, at least for a side light, maybe instead of that disconnected window, that might be a similar cost. Can you speak to whether there are any concerns about privacy or concerns about, say, the receptionists that might be sitting inside of here, their need for a view outside or their need to see visitors that are coming?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a need for visibility to see out, to anticipate people coming to the space. to open the door for them if necessary. I think an alternative to the sort of what's shown as the single window separated from the door would be a storefront door with a single storefront side light incorporated into the same opening to give about the same amount of glass that's shown on the proposed drawing, and would still address the visibility, security, and light that we're seeking.
Thank you.
So any motion, say if there was a motion for, I guess, approval, it could be qualified as an advisory to increase the opening width to accommodate a side light. Lois?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept this alteration with the caveat that instead of the punched window, that there is a 12 to 18 inch side light incorporated with the door.
Okay. Is there a second on that motion? Tom? Okay, is that a second also, Russell? Okay, thank you.
Might I just add, I would like to confirm, given the drawings don't show it, that the sconces also are part of that entranceway. That and the side light would give it a full entrance presence, I think.
Right, thank you. Okay. Okay, all those, so this one may be a little bit less controversial. If I don't see any hands raised, then by unanimous consent, with the condition, item number 3 is accepted. Side light. That brings us then to the private entrances. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Kevin. This one has a big impact, and I think Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, the staff had. Could you remind us of the staff's concern and discussion on this one, please?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Staff believes that this is one of the more significant design alterations that's being proposed, and it does change the concept of the proposal in many ways. I think there's a couple of elements that I'd highlight here. First is the removal of the individual entrances themselves. I think secondly, there are grading changes that are proposed. Essentially, in some of the areas where there's grade, there is, I'll call it a terraced approach, and there were some retaining walls that kind of had more of a gradual step down. And I'll let the design team speak to this, but at least staff's understanding is the retaining walls are going to be removed and it's going to be left with a slope. You can see on some of the renderings, you can see that where there are stairs, this does lead to some fairly long runs of stairs in a few locations. So again, just as far as feedback from the commission, if they saw a difference, in terms of treating the street front versus the interior sides differently, that was something staff had raised in the development team. And as mentioned in the presentation, staff had also looked at, is there a way to do perhaps shared connections to the public sidewalk, but maintaining those entrances or other options that would be closer to the concept that was ultimately reviewed by UDC plan and Common Council when this went through back in 2019.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Russell.
Thank you. Question for you, Andy. If I'm understanding correctly, even though the stairs leading up to the what used to be private entrances is being removed, the door and the window treatment or attached to the doors are staying the same. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
You're not looking to match the sliding glass door that we see in the upper units.
I wish we would have been able to, but those elements have been purchased.
Okay. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. It's well, another question then too, have you as a designer weighed in on where the priorities might be for a compromised approach for certain elevations or certain parts of the buildings that really would be the priority for that original design element?
Yes, I have, and I appreciate that question. If you could go back to the plan slide. So given the attention that's being paid to this element and the character that the commission believes it delivers for the project, I propose that this element is a more residential feeling architectural element, a neighborhood type element, and that Windstone Drive is our sort of neighborhood street. Our community spans that drive, and therefore a compromise would be to build the unit stairs and private entrances that face Windstone Drive on building 4, 2, and 3. And forego the private entrances off of Milwaukee Street and Advantage Drive and the backs of the buildings.
Would that include number 5 as well?
Yes, building 5 is not on the table for removal.
Yeah.
That will be built as proposed.
Okay, thank you.
And then one caveat I would say is the building 4, as you work south on Windstone Drive towards Milwaukee, the grade differential between the finished floor and the right of way is exacerbated. So we may end up, the most economical may be to connect the southernmost or the southern 2 most with a shared walk and stair, as opposed to building 3 stairs for 3 units. We would build 1 stair, but ideally we would be able to get there without building an individual staircase or being required to build an individual staircase for each of those.
Okay, thanks. So we see the applicant willing to come back and add some of those all along Windstone Drive, and again, that could be a condition of approval as well. I think that I think along Milwaukee Street, it's a busier street. As he said, there's a large grade, and who wants to walk up a straight flight of huge stairs, particularly if it's not your primary entrance. We still have the balconies there, and so they're still addressing the street. There's still activation there. It's just not a direct connection into the unit. I agree with Russell. I think in that case it would probably be better off to have the sliders, but they're purchased, and with the balcony being recessed, it may not be all that noticeable once the railing is up anyway. So are there any other comments or questions with regard to this or the suggestion that Andy made in terms of adding back some private entrances? Christian.
Asking for got me?
Yes, yep.
Okay, I'm just asking for a quick recap of which ones would be left then. Is it the ones facing Windstone Drive and
right.
that including that yellow shaded area, subject to possible consolidation, and also the 4 on Advantage Drive?
I didn't hear anything about Advantage Drive.
No, only on Windstone Drive.
So the buildings 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the entrances that directly face Windstone Drive.
Yes,
so
correct.
By my count, about 13. So that would be about a third of the total units.
On that first floor, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is any other questions, Christian, or?
No, I mean, it sounds like they've sort of suggested their own compromise for this. I'm sure, being only 1/3 of what they were looking for, it's limiting, the cost savings. But I agree that, having that kind of look and amenity for the tenants was a real plus in this, and to remove all of them is a pretty serious detriment. But if a compromise needs to be made, I think that's a pretty reasonable one, and will sort of maintain that more neighborhood feel along Windstone Drive.
Okay. Russell?
My hand might be up from earlier. I apologize.
All right. Is there a motion on the proposal, the compromise, or anything in between? Lois?
I'd move to accept the item 4 with the compromise that the 13 direct access entries are maintained facing Windstone Drive.
Okay. Is there a second? Jessica, that's a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Questions, comments on the motion before we vote? Okay. Let's see. Russell?
Just a question to Andy. Could you just walk us through people that park in the parking lot now that there's not a direct? I mean, there's already people that are visiting upper floor residents anyway, but what is the pedestrian entrance to building 1 and 2? Are those the secondary entrances we talked about in item 1?
Yes, if you're talking about resident, then the residents will have the capacity to enter the buildings on the ends through the stairwells, if that's closer to their parking space, or they can enter at the sort of interior corner of each of the buildings where the lobby is.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Hey, Russell. This is RJ. I just want to add to what Andy said. We have underground parking for all of these buildings. So, right, our expectation is most of the residents are probably actually going to utilize the underground parking. And so there will be an elevator that takes them up to the central corridor of every building. So that is honestly how I expect most residents to get to and from their apartments most of the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion before we vote? Okay. All those in favor of item number 4, adding the stairs back along Windstone Drive, please signify by raising your hand. Looks unanimous to me. Is that what you get, Kevin? Okay. All right, so item number 4 passes with that condition, which brings us to item number 5. Lowering the hands. Okay, good. This is the sconce, and I have to say that this kind of goes to what Rafiq was speaking about earlier, to look up at balconies and see a light that's in the ceiling, a source of glare, not only is, I think, not attractive as a sconce light, but I also think the quality of light in the balcony is going to be harsh versus a soft light that reflects off the side. So my personal feeling is that this really it just gives kind of a feeling of cheapness for just swapping out some light fixtures. But I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. Lois?
I agree 100%. I think it would look like an old motel or something, where you have those big, emergency lights up there. And also, I just question if that's such a huge savings. I mean, light fixtures, I'm just not seeing how that's such a huge effect on the budget. Honestly, you're roughing in lights, and I'd rather have a less expensive sconce than a overhead.
But not a colonial style bare bulb thing that you used to see in the 70s in the neighborhood I grew up, I hope. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Shane?
I agree. I was just going to make a motion to reject this item.
Okay. Is there a second? Lois, seconded by Lois. All right. So let's see then. With regard to item number 5, the motion is for denial. All those in support of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Okay.
Here's as well.
Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and then we'll just to be sure, if we can lower those hands.
Well, perhaps it wasn't. I'm sorry. Maybe it was not unanimous.
No, it was not.
Okay, I apologize. I miscounted hands.
And those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. Because if I'm not mistaken, I did not see Rafiq and Russell vote in favor. I just want to make sure we're correct on this. Are you not voting, Russell, or did we miscount you?
Sorry, Chair, but I'm not even sure why we were voting. I didn't hear any contestants to the second.
I just wanted to be wanted to be sure.
I'm kind of, can I be neutral on this one? I'm deferring
stick your
to
neck
my
out
colleagues.
and go ahead and stick your neck out. Go ahead and vote one way or the other.
I like the sconces, but I saw everybody jump up with their hands to say yes. But you can count me in the approve if you really.
Okay.
You can count me in the first group if you need me to stick my neck out.
Thank you very much. Let's see. And Rafiq, did we miss your vote?
That's you, right?
Right.
Okay.
So two images of a project.
We're a firm member, right? That's not.
Are we?
You there, Rafiq?
I don't know. We wouldn't be.
That I don't know.
Oh.
I think he's not. So we will say that he abstained from voting, and the motion passes, I think, 6 with 1 abstention. Okay. So that motion or that request is denied, and that brings us to number 6, the common patio space. Okay, Lois and then Shane.
I don't have any objections to this part. If there's more green space, I think that's just as utilized from families. So, increasing green space is fine too.
Okay, Shane.
Yeah, I was actually going to go the opposite route and just say I liked the original design. I hear what Lois is saying about green space. I'm not sure if it's usable like lawn space with fewer plantings, but I think what we had originally was kind of nice, and I don't want to make it less nice. And I think the applicant recognizes the importance of having the space, so that's not really so much the issue, but I would be in favor of keeping the original approved design.
Okay. See any other discussion on the motion, Tom?
Yeah, yeah. Can the applicant just describe how will the rest of the space be finished? That was my key question. With the reduced patio, is that just lawn or what?
Yes, lawn.
Okay.
So we have in the proposed design the same amount of usable patio area. It's just consolidated onto one level at the higher elevation closer to the door. So we have not really changed the program. We've just reconfigured it in a more economical layout. And the remainder of the space from the patio will slope down to the parking in a lawn.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Shane, and then followed by Lois.
I think I could be convinced to make this compromise, but I do still feel like the right-hand solution, the proposed solution, could use more plant material supporting the edges of the space, because there's a pretty drastic reduction in planting, and I see the benefit of having more lawn space as a usable open space, but I think you maybe went a little too far in reducing the planting material that actually holds that hardscape instead of it just floating kind of on its own in lawn. So that would be my recommendation if we go that route.
Okay. And Lois.
So I will then make a motion based on that to accept the proposed alteration with the caveat that we would like a little bit more plantings at the edge of the patio.
Okay. Tom, is that a second? Okay, thank you. And then Jessica, discussion on the motion?
Yeah. So the proposal is kind of at a disadvantage because we saw a nicer outdoor area. Now we're being asked to see a maybe not as developed, not as complex. To compare them, of course, the previous one is nicer. But for the new one, I'd also like to, it looks like maybe there are walls and planters and seating. So what the original plan had were different types of spaces outside. So open area grass is great, but not everybody can play in that or sit in that. So I'm thinking of people who have walkers or toddlers or whatever. To have more than just a flat patio would be nice if there's still planters too that you might lean up against with a bench or something like that. So it's not just plantings, I hope, that can be incorporated into the new one, but it just seems like on the original one, there are different types of spaces to sit rather than just a flat patio. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think there's more than just plantings to be put.
Okay. Let's see. Any other discussion, comments, amendments to the motion? Okay, I don't see any. So we have a motion for approval with some enhanced landscaping, which was seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, looks unanimous. Thank you. And that brings us to number 7, which is the landscaping, which, if you recall, Brian described in the landscape plan. Is it just in this area? I'll ask that's either Brian or Andy. Is it just in the area that is shown here in detail?
No, it would be across the entire site. We just use that as a zoom in to kind of show the effect of the before and after.
All right, thank you. Christian?
Again, this is one of the things where I'm just skeptical as to how much money is being saved. I mean, it looked like they, kept the majority of the bigger trees, which is good, and then, cut back with some, and then upped numbers of other things, and ended up with something slightly above this, what the city's landscape point formula requires. So, they pointed out that they are still in compliance with that. I would just say barely, because what we've gotten used to seeing with these large multi-building projects is frequently at least 50% more than what is required, and we've seen some that are as much as 2, and even I can recall a couple that were 3 times what was required. So they are complying with the letter of the law, but I went through here several times, and I guess I couldn't find anywhere what that number had been earlier. I just saw what it was now. But again, if you're planting even like 500 less perennials in bulk, single digit prices, I mean, the amount of money saved on those is such a minimal part of what they say is a $5 million deficit. It just seems like you're taking something away that has the ability to still keep up the appearances here, to just save a pittance. And it just seems like the wrong place to look to save money. I just don't buy that there's much savings to be had in that, without going into nitpicky detail of what should stay and what should go on a per plant basis. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Shane?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with Christian. I'll acknowledge that with the elimination of some of the private entries, there's a reconfiguration of the planting that needs to happen. But in no way do I think we should reduce the quantity or quality of the plant material. Specifically, I think in the little vignette that we saw, swapping out a double row of ornamental grasses with potentially whatever that shrub symbol might be is just something I don't think we want to agree to. It won't have the same impact if that's a single spirea versus a double row of an ornamental grass. So long story short, I think we should, I would make a motion to reject this proposal, but also acknowledge that there is some reconfiguration of the plant material necessary because of the elimination of certain entries.
All right. Is there a second on that motion? Christian, there's a second on the motion. Okay, discussion on the motion. Okay, I guess Jessica was just seconding the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, no discussion on the motion. Then all in favor of the motion to deny the request for reduced landscaping, please signify by raising your hand. Okay, that is also unanimous. Okay, so in summary, to me, it looks like item number 1 was accepted. Item number 2 was denied. 3 and 4 were accepted with conditions. 5 was denied. 6 was accepted with some more plant material. And then item number 7 was denied. All advisory recommendations to the plan director. Let's see. I have Rafiq and Christian, and then Kevin wanting to speak. Let's see. Is that right? No. I guess they just still had their hands up for voting. Go ahead, Kevin.
We have all the motions as the chair mentioned, and we'll note that in the record. From a standpoint of how, I'm still muted. Am I muted?
We hear you.
Oh, I just got the message that I was muted. So, okay. From a standpoint of how the motions get entered, they do have to be entered as a single vote, and then we can put the notes on beneath in terms of the individual actions, so we won't lose any of the data. But I'd request, just for a sake of entering the minutes, if we could get an overall motion to just approve what all of the different sub-motions that just occurred.
Well, that should be easy enough. Tom, seconded by Lois. Okay. All those in favor of accepting the 7 sub-motions that were previously deliberated and voted on, please signify by raising your hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was productive, and we really do hope that the project is able to go forward. We all recognize and acknowledge the need for the housing. Now we're going to head back to Johnson Street for an informational presentation for a new student apartment building on 504 West Johnson, corner of Bassett.
And Chair, Julie can read the speakers here, and just very recently, a revised set of plans to be presented was just sent to staff. I just wanted to note, I received the plans, but I'm having the file type is not opening right now, or the PDF is not opening. And so I know Neil is, I believe, one of the speakers tonight, and he had sent me the revised plans, but I just wanted to note that I'm going to go with the existing one that was sent over this morning because I can't get the other one to open at this time.
Hi, Kevin. That'll be just fine. This is Neil. Yes, thank you for trying to make that work. There's just a slight reduced quality is all.
Okay, sorry about that, Neil.
No problem.
So our registrants on this item are Neil George Reardon, Mitch Court, and Jessica Vaughn.
Okay, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. If the presentation's up, I'll go through and do about a 3-minute presentation here and then leave time for questions and answers. We're excited to talk to all you folks about this project. It's been a little while in the making now. My name is Neil Reardon with ESG Architecture and Design. I'm here representing Subtext as the developer, as well as our civil engineers and planning partners at JSD and our landscape architects at Damon Farber. Next slide, please. As you've already, won't spend time long on this, we're right in the bend here on Johnson and Bassett, but there you see it in context of everything else on the isthmus, the Capitol, each lake, and the campus. Next slide. Just kind of some landmarks here, the Bassett Street corridor, the Johnson Street corridor, the East Campus Mall, as well as the bicycle trail leading west. Next slide. Here are the parcels that make up our site. So we'll be combining these parcels into a new one project site. So there you can see here as 8 total parcels, all relatively small with aging buildings on them that would be torn down as part of the process. Next slide, please. Here you see just some aerials in 3 dimensions and a few site photos here, just indicating that site area again. We're within that 12-story general district in this area of downtown, and our building is indeed 12 stories as proposed. Next slide, please. Here's just a little concept diagram of our massing. We have a few setbacks to observe, but generally there are 0 lot line conditions that we're using here. So I'll just note each side of the project. The side yard on the back that faces west has a setback of 10 feet, and that is elective on our part to get glazing. That's more of a building setback rather than a planning setback. The same is true along Conklin Street as well, which is really the rear alley on the north side of the site. Electively, then we are making those setbacks. And then what's required of us for setbacks is actually a 5-foot setback at level 1 per your new ordinance, Boulevard Terrace ordinance along the street. So that's along Johnson, where we're stepping back 5 feet. And we're doing that the continuous height of the building, not just at level 1. And then just a very small setback, no setback required along Bassett. And so our setback there is very minimal at 1'6". Next slide, please. So here you can kind of see the massing of that courtyard just pulled out. We wanted to kind of just talk about, the available massing and then what we're choosing to do with our building. So next slide, please, again. So the big concept diagram here is at level 1 is really to do residential and lobby amenity here at the Bassett Street side. And so the entry would be right at that main pointed corner. That's the main entry to the building, and then residential and lobby functions in the green box. We think it's really important to activate Johnson Street. And so we have residential liner units there that are walk-up units with stoops and steps and entries off the street. They also have a rear entry on the back side of the building. And then the remainder of the interior is bicycle parking, as well as a motor vehicle parking area and a drop-off court, which we think is really important because neither Johnson, Bassett, or Conklin have the ability to really to have the capacity to do drop-offs and vehicle stops. Next diagram. Here's the overall site plan that we're seeing. So we've proposed 3 street trees along Bassett Street. We've proposed 6 street trees along Johnson, and we're going to work through with fire departments as well as forestry departments and several others, so they can weigh in on this streetscape design. We wanted to put forward what we think is the appropriate streetscape design here for you tonight, and really get your feedback on the terraces, the boulevard, the bike lanes, all of the frontages that are facing the public right-of-way in our project. So here you see that those walk-ups up against the orange components there. There's 5 residential walk-up units there with 5 stoops facing, and they sort of jog along that curve in the bend in Johnson Street. Additionally, a bicycle parking room there in the darker gray, as well as a motor vehicle court. And if you want to go to the next slide, I think this might be a little clearer on that one. Yeah, here you can see again a level 1 floor plan here a little more clearly with the images. The vehicle court I'll just talk about quickly, and we do want your feedback on Conklin, as noted in the staff report for this meeting. You're interested in what is the relationship to Conklin Place. Basically, the relationship to Conklin Place is we need to service the building on one side, as we're not really able to do so on the Bassett side, the Johnson side, or the Western side. So we have a pull-in, pull-out situation where we really think it's going to be valuable to do all of our loading, rideshare pickup and drop-off, and any other deliveries for the building through this open parking area. And there would not be garage doors here where you'd take a right in from Conklin, and then you'd pull into the parking zone, and then you'd take a right out onto Conklin and then proceed to Bassett. Additionally, we are working with MG&E and our electrical engineers on a lot of these utilitarian functions here, the generators, the transformers, as well as some of the other utilitarian functions of trash service and collection. We are going to work through some changes on those, but we do anticipate these happening generally in the vicinity of Conklin. And we think it's really appropriate to do it there rather than somewhere else. We also feel that there's a lot of value to this temporary drop-off this temporary loading zone, as well as the drop-offs in the back of the building here. So I'll just note then that the ramp down to the sublevels of parking is secured there at the top of that ramp, and then the rest of the building is enclosed from there on. Next slide, please. Here's a floor plan of the sublevel of the building. Again, that speed ramp that takes you up and down takes you down to a P1 level, and then subsequently we have a P2 level. So 2 levels of underground parking here, with a total of 110 to 120 parking stalls in total for the project. Next slide, please. Looking at a level 2 floor plan, the amenity deck here opens up, and this is and the rest of it looks like a typical level of housing, a mix of 5 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 stack of 3 bedrooms, as well as the elevator core. And at this time, we're thinking about a small study room on each floor. Total number of dwelling units in the project is between 140 and 150 dwelling units. And then at present, our number of bedrooms, total bedrooms in the project, is 525 to 540. Next slide, please. And so here you see that typical floor plan. This would be levels 3 through 11, all the same floor plan here. But again, that courtyard opening up to the south to some view angles, as well as natural light. And then each of these wings of the building, sort of fronting Bassett, and then the western property line as well. Next slide, please. Then when we get to level 12, we do have some amenities spaces, some common areas for the building. Mainly the amenity club room would be an open, fairly glassy room there at the end. And that looks southeasternly, which is actually the position of the building where we have the best views towards the lake and the fewest other tall buildings near us. So that's positioned there intentionally. And then some other supportive amenities spaces flanked throughout. And then the western side of this floor plan is dwelling units again. Next slide, please. And then up here on the roof, this is very much a roof plan. The only enclosed spaces we have up here are stairs, elevator, access, as well as an equipment room. And that equipment room is really serving the functions that would happen up here on the roof. We are at this time considering a fair amount of green roof up here and working on the design of that to comply with the stormwater requirements. And so you'll see a little more detail on that in future plans, but very much this is an active and passive rooftop with both of those types of spaces happening and delineated for the residents of the building. So very, very important to note here that we are complying with the 12-story requirement. This is not a 13-story building. This is very much a roof deck. And the only enclosed spaces up here are the equipment room and the stairs and the elevator overrun. Next slide, please. So on to some renderings very quickly and then get to your feedback. This is a view kind of looking up Bassett to the northwest. What we're doing here is the major design party is to kind of split the volumes, the massing, and break them down into a thinner proportion. We really feel like this thinner, tall proportion on the gray, the medium gray brick material here is a good solution, and we feel that's a strong way to represent that main corner of Bassett and Johnson. And then the remainder, the other product is a dark metal panel at this time, and we're thinking, that's a nice way to make the building elegantly kind of fade away. We are considering some other design options at this point, and we do want to engage with you on design feedback on the materials at this time, so that we can make some improvements to those if necessary. I apologize for the blurry views here. I think the file that I had sent Kevin earlier today had some technical issues, so I apologize for the blurriness on here. We'll certainly have an improved file next time. Next slide, please. Here are a couple more views of that on the right-hand side of that corner at Bassett and Johnson and some of the materiality there. And then the other view on the left-hand side is looking the other direction on Bassett as if you were approaching the building from more the State Street side of the property. Next slide. Then here's kind of the courtyard view directly from the south. This would be again showing that we really have just very simple material palette here. It's the medium gray and the black at this point. So at this time, we'd like to, again, ping you for feedback on those materials. We are thinking about some textures and some other opportunities to further define those. Next slide, please. And then a view of the walk-ups here. We have, again, those 5 walk-ups. We have a very ample terrace here, and then we've synced up the dimensions of the terrace and the sidewalks to the preferred dimensional notes from the various departments through some initial meetings at the DAT, through the DAT process. Next slide. A view of the corner here. We have some structure coming down here at the corner. We think there's kind of a special moment there where to kind of just expose some of that building structure and taper back our first floor just ever so slightly near the main entry of the building. Again, this shot is from the corner of Bassett and Johnson. And I think captures kind of, what we're trying to do here pretty well at the street level. Ample pedestrian space, wide boulevards for game days or whenever there's lots of pedestrians around. And worth mentioning here that the bike lane is going to be rebuilt or kept as is along Bassett Street. Next slide. And then a view from Bassett's side as well, kind of looking at that lobby and then the lower portion of the building and how that brickwork is sitting kind of on that plinth of the first floor. Next slide. And then lastly, that's kind of that pulled back from that last image. I know one of the items in the staff report was asking about long views. So we were kind of curious about what exactly long views meant. We're happy to provide views for you following up from this meeting, or of course in future iterations on what those are. We can do those and look forward to working with you to illustrate it from whatever direction we need to do so. So thank you, and I want to leave the rest of the time for back and forth questions if you have them.
Thank you. Questions and comments. I see Rafiq, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah. So if I look at the lower level, it looks like you took into some consideration the pedestrian experience. You pull some things back. You have this column thing that's right there as a moment. There's like a floor to ceiling storefront system. But then when you go up, it's very flat. It's the windows are a nice design, like the pattern of the mullions, but it's just so flat. It's just straight up. There's no relief. There's no articulation. There's no pushing and pulling. It's just a very flat rectangle. When you get to the top floor of the corner unit, and I like that corner treatment too. That's different. But then when you get to that top floor, those windows are significantly taller, which signifies that there's something different there. But there was opportunity to push that back or do something to create that cap, other than just have that larger band of windows. So I think that the building form itself, the mass, needs a little bit of excitement. It's just not a dynamic, and it's not bad. It's just very flat, if that makes any sense. And I think the materials are fine. I mean, it's very blurry, but I think the materials are fine as I can tell. I just think you need a little bit of articulation in some of the, and I don't, it could just be, I don't know what it could be, something, but it's just very flat.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're considering is some articulation a little bit on the massing. So
This is not a question. He said it looked flat, so we're still opening up for commissioners' questions if they have any, and then we would definitely invite you to respond. Russell and then Shane.
Hi, nice presentation, and fortunately, the plans that did come through to us, the renderings on the plans are a much better quality. So I was mostly referring to those during the presentation. The first thing that comes to mind for me in this project, question for you, applicant. This seems like a really great opportunity to improve the bike commuting path through there, because that's a pretty critical juncture where all the university bike bicyclists get over to Johnson right at that corner. And I don't really know that it's on this project to improve this, but have you spoke to the transportation department, group at the city and learned exactly what the opportunities are there and what are the thoughts on improving that?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we did have a DAT meeting, and I believe the transportation personnel was there. We didn't engage about that specific item, but yeah, I think that would be one of the first topics as we reach out to each department following this meeting is our plan. So
keep it in mind. Keep it in mind because right now your plans basically read that there's this really nice bike path that just dies at the intersection, and what actually happens is everybody turns and goes up Johnson, and it's a very high trafficked as far as bike commuters. The other comment I have, I appreciate the materials. It appears that you're proposing some nice high quality materials. I would just maybe suggest. And I think in informational, we normally don't maybe go too deep into this anyway, but it seems to me that all the buildings around this project site are a warm tone kind of masonry, and that this building, it seems to me, would stand out a little bit. Maybe that's what you want to do, but it seems much darker. It reads much darker than what I see or I know of the buildings around there. So. I really like the roof deck. I appreciate that. I appreciate your ambitions on stormwater retention with some green roof. I will be very supportive of you kind of achieving some of those goals. I do like the window treatments as well. But I do agree with Rafiq on the notions of maybe some opportunities to do something interesting with the mass. So, thank you. Those are my comments.
Shane.
Thank you. I agree with both Rafiq and Russell's comments. I think they offered some good insights there. I just wanted to comment on the green roof space. It's nice to see that type of amenity again included for not just stormwater management, but also as outdoor relief and people spaces and spaces for potentially plants and birds and other creatures besides humans. So to that point, I would highly recommend that at least the second story roof space be more than just an extensive roof, more than just that kind of like 4-inch sedum mat type roof, but that it has some substance to it and depth, at least a semi-intensive. So at least, 6 to 8 inches of depth, so you could support some other plant species, including native perennials, would be nice in that type of spot where you get a lot of visibility down on it, especially. I think that is more critical to this space than the upper roof, green roof on the top, which I think is still a nice idea and approach to stormwater management, but probably a little less visible. Otherwise, I like the way there is some relief as you wrap around on Johnson between the building, that there's a little bit of stepping and setback because it is a tall building in a kind of a tall corridor through that streetscape. So I think that helps the pedestrian experience. And I like the way that you've integrated some of these walls and plant material into kind of the architecture of that edge. So that seems to be headed in the right direction, in my opinion. Thanks, that's all.
Go ahead, Lois.
Thank you, Chair.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
There you
Am I
go.
in? Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
you're all set.
All right. I'm not opposed to the verticalness of that corner piece. I think it's a nice tailored element. Where I do think it could use a little maybe flair is, that especially at the where we have brick, the double soldier course right at the base. I think there's an opportunity to do something more interesting with the brick at that level. And I don't know if it's something that does protrude a little bit, or if it's just a textural expression for the brick. I think the double soldier course looks really institutional. We have that all over campus, and it seems like there could be something really special at that kind of skirt. And then at the metal panel parts of the building, I think I would like to see something a little bit more interesting there. I don't know if it's, I don't want to suggest that you add color or anything, but, and I think you did mention that you're looking at adding texture or something. It is kind of dark. The James around kind of as it comes around Gorham, I think, is really dark too. And I don't know if it's very successful because there's no relief from all of that. I think it's like a dark charcoal building. So I don't know, think about adding something to this that would make it more interesting than just kind of a big brown, rectangle. And that's all I have. I do like how you've stepped it back at the pedestrian level, and I really appreciate the way you have the drive-through for the drop-off. This is a really highly trafficked corner, and people just kind of whip around. So I think having that was a really good idea. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. I see Jessica and Tom have some comments, but I'm just going to jump in here, and I guess I'm going to contradict my fellow commissioners a little bit. I think there are some more fundamental issues with this design that really should be addressed here at the informational level. First, I don't really think it adequately acknowledges or celebrates the curve. That little sawtooth of the walk-up units there, it to me is kind of foreign to the smoothness and the flow of the curve there. Although I really do like and appreciate the fact that you are taking the sidewalk right off of the curb of Johnson Street there and bringing it inboard, because that's not a pleasant place to walk at the moment. So that's a good thing. But I really think the walk-up units belong facing Bassett and the bike path, and maybe having the where we see the storefront and the Verve sign and all that activity inside the lobby and the amenity space being on the curve where people are zooming by, not having your walk-up apartment right there. It's a highway in the morning. A lot of us go to work that way, and you're whipping through there pretty good. So I just think it's juxtaposed to logically where it really should be. I guess I do agree with the comments of the dark panels and the gray brick. I know if you come to Madison and you look around and you see the buildings we approved, you must think we like beige and dark brick and black panels. But I agree with Lois and others that a little bit of a punch of color, something other than beige and brown, would be a nice counterpoint to everything, to a lot of other things that we see there. So I really think that should really take a look, particularly at the ground plane, on how that's programmed and how that's expressed along those two corners there. I'll save this for later. I had a question for Kevin. Go ahead, Jessica, and then Tom.
Yeah, I'll one up Cliff, and I know it's probably not possible, but maybe the walk-ups belong on Conklin, because Conklin is barely the width of a legal street, I think. So you've got transformers back there, and that's where you're entering for parking. It's just all really, really tight. Plus there's a little house there. It's a 4-story house, but it looks like a little house now compared to the building. So I would agree with Cliff that maybe it's worth considering, doing the walk-ups on maybe the Conklin side, though I understand you can't necessarily have delivery coming off Johnson as it goes around the corner there. So you're kind of limited, but wow, is that a tough sell on Conklin, especially for that one house sitting there, which I assume is going to come down someday, but that site is so small, I don't know what would happen there. I also wanted to just agree about the dark storefront on the base. Dark metal panels, fine, but maybe just at least the storefront framing system on the first floor, if it could not be so dark. That's it.
Thank you. Tom.
Thanks, Cliff. One of my first reactions was about the curve and the fact that there was nothing on the building at that ground level that, as you said, celebrated the curve or took advantage of it or echoed it in any way. And so I would just second that very issue. And I hadn't thought about, I was still thinking the walk-up units would be there, but perhaps your idea, Cliff, of moving them onto Bassett is at least one option that ought to be explored. It feels like that heavy. The walk-up units just feel heavy, a lot of masonry, kind of closed in, and not in keeping with. It doesn't celebrate, but it doesn't even seem to be in keeping with the rest of the building. So I had trouble with that first floor aspect of the building. Although I do appreciate the setback and moving the sidewalk in very much. The second question I had was on the Westernmost Tower, the one that appears to be all clad in that same brown material. We're not seeing the westernmost side of it, but if that is just one solid, and as Rafiq said, flat set of surfaces, it needs something. It needs relief. Whether additional materials, whether color, whether we won't say, but that to me as a big brown box doesn't fly. And then I do have a question right at the base of that westernmost tower. Is that a little orphan parking lot that remains right here? There seems to be, right there. Is that currently parking? Does that just remain there, or what's its future status? It's sort of like the orphan house on the other side. What happens to these places? So that's what I have.
But are you looking for an answer though?
Well,
Tom?
when the client comes back to answer, I'd like an answer to that question.
Yeah, he can go ahead and respond now.
Okay.
Hi, Neil Reardon again. That parking lot is off the property. That's part of this project. It belongs to the property to the west.
It does belong to okay. So it's in use by that building.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Russell.
I believe Neil asked for a little guidance on the long views, and I was just going to say that I think how at least the car traffic is going to experience this building, we're not really seeing here, and it is that if we could go a little bit to the left and look at this building as we're all zooming around Johnson and the curve here. So Neil, I think others here could educate you more, but I think we're just looking for the views of the building from kind of further out and how it's going to be experienced, and that's one angle that we don't have currently. I was curious about the dog run back there. It seems like it seems like you're just trying to make the best use of that sort of dead corner back there because you're kind of landlocked and you don't have the parking lot to use. But anyway, it just seems like a interesting choice of that space. Although I'm sure there are many residents that will have dogs and may appreciate having a place. But those are my other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I see no other hands. Kevin, the question I had was with regard to the roof amenity, and I think prior projects we've been told that no matter how small, if you've got 2 stairs, an elevator, and a little lobby, that's a floor. But my understanding is really not for us to deliberate with the applicant, that staff will make a finding on that, and then they'll bring back something in compliance.
That's correct. And it was noted as a heads up in the staff report, but it's a call that zoning would have to make. And essentially it would be, they would have to say that it complies. Essentially, your understanding of the code is correct, that for it not to count as a story, it has to be the bare minimum to allow access to it, and it can't have a community room and other things. And I think that, the developer's presentation at the beginning kind of showed the limits of what they were actually proposing on that level. But we'll follow up and again suggest they follow up directly with zoning. They've had multiple discussions about zoning compliance, and just to make sure that when they come back next time, they have something that does comply, or to confirm that this concept does comply.
Okay, fair enough. This is informational, and I'm sure that the designers and the developer would like to hear all of our comments before they come back with a formal application. So if there's any other thoughts or concerns, now's the time to raise them. I know we did give them some pretty general and specific feedback, and that's good. Rafiq.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that you don't have to use the colors that you see around town or the materials. Like, really think outside of the box.
Mm-hmm. Please. Thank you. Okay. This was informational. We thank you very much. It's a nice corner to redevelop. And that then brings us to business by members. Tom.
Okay. So hate me for bringing something up, but I want to point out that the Kevin and planning staff have been working on 3 very large planning efforts over the last several years here that are now coming to fruition: the Odana area plan, the Greater Easttown area plan, and the South Madison plan. These plans have all been or are going to be presented to the Plan Commission. They've also been taken before the Parks Commission. Some have even gone to Transportation. All 3 of these plans either incorporate or touch on urban design districts. So like South Madison plan, the Park Street District 7 and the John Nolan District 1, both either border or cut right through the planning area. Urban Design District 5 is goes right through part of the Easttown plan, and Urban Design District 2 is totally incorporated in the Odana plan. We haven't seen any of those. We can go online, we can look them up, but I just wonder, given the sort of their prominence and the fact that other commissions and committees have been sort of briefed on these, whether I know we're not looking for any additional to stretch the meetings out any longer, but I kind of think they're important, particularly the fact that they all have incorporate urban design district components, whether or not we wouldn't want a brief informational on those 3 plans, not all at once, but at some time in the future. Just bring it up because they're all kind of moving forward pretty quickly.
And just to note, that can certainly be arranged. We can do a briefing when the 2 that aren't, the Odana plan was actually approved by the Common Council relatively recently. The other 2 are still in there, still being developed. So we could certainly, find a way to bring them either, informationally as discussion items, or if the Alder, when they were introduced, it could technically be referred here if there were significant discussion points related to urban design districts and things that are under the purview of this body. But I guess I'd suggest, if the body would like, we can certainly have members of that team come to you, and there's an agenda that's a little bit lighter. And there's I would recommend we do that in the near future, because those plans are certainly being developed right now.
Yeah, thank you. And at least it would be good even if we're not advisory or approval, just to hear the staff's perspective and the major initiatives of the plan, so that we can use that in context with projects that may come up within those areas. Okay. we briefly talked about this before, but I would like to arrange in a future meeting to do voting for officers, I guess is the correct term. So I don't know, maybe depending on our agendas coming up, if we, and this one, it's not 7 o'clock yet, and it would only take a few minutes, but I think with our vice chair leaving, and if I go back and look, we probably haven't had a vote in over a year, and I think we're supposed to vote yearly, that we would just find that on a future agenda and then be prepared for motions and suggestions on that. Okay. Anything else from anybody? All right. Oh, Jessica.
Yeah, still waiting for that meeting where we get to talk about boring design.
Boring design?
Yes.
Like soil borings?
No, Cliff.
No. Oh, you mean not interesting?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's plenty of that around.
And I know that came up, I believe it was at the last meeting, and Jessica, I think it might have been you who kind of started raising that. I guess my sense leaving that discussion was that'd be something a couple ways that I think we could approach it. One, I think we already have kind of something in our work plan to work through and kind of update the urban design district standards. Janine had started that, and then we put a pause on that just as she left. But I think that's something that when we have our new full-time secretary, I think you'd definitely be part of that discussion. And I also think it's a good discussion to have once we have the new secretary, hopefully later this year and to kind of, bring that person up to kind of speed and kind of start to kind of address maybe these bigger picture issues when we have a permanent person in this spot. But I guess it's the will of the body if we want to start to engage sooner. But hopefully by the end of the year we will have a new full-time secretary, and you can see less of me then.
I want it all. I want you both. Okay, thank you. As long as we don't forget to have that conversation, because I'm pretty keen on it.
Yeah, I agree. It is important to do that. We don't have time to a lot of times talk globally as a commission. We're focused on agenda items too much, or not too much, but predominantly. Okay, then seeing no other hands raised, we'll look to see everybody then on the, go ahead, Tom.
All right, sorry, but just on that topic, I guess one question I have is, I have a bunch of ideas that I would like to share with people, but I'm always terrified of the traveling quorum issue and all that in terms of how to communicate with other commissioners. Is there if I shared a list of thoughts I had with Cliff and Kevin, can you take them forward, or when it's not a specific agenda item, are we allowed to talk to each other? I mean, we seem so hamstrung.
What I would recommend is, Tom, if you've got why don't you email staff that list in terms of things you want to talk about, and I can kind of communicate with the chair. There are, quorum issues depending on, how many people get pulled in. So if you want to start by sending me the list of discussion items, and then we can kind of take it from there, that'd be my recommendation.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I look forward to taking a look at that. Thanks.
We don't want you going to parliamentary jail. Russell. Hold on. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Jessica and I ran into each other the other day, and we were skittish to talk any UDC, and we were very, very careful. But we are planning to accidentally run into each other more, over coffee. So anyway, Tom, I'd take you up on a coffee or buy you a coffee one of these days, so just accidentally.
Maybe we all accidentally meet at the Village Bar on Speedway, maybe, I don't know, next Wednesday at 6.
I don't think they're open yet. I go by there every day and they don't let me in. Christian.
I ran into Jessica at a liquor store once, and we had a really fruitful discussion.
Jeez.
As your no fun staff for the time being, if we do need any sort of updates on a refresher on quorum rules and so forth, I'm happy to also provide that, just so you know what's in bounds and what's not. So I can certainly get that info from the attorney's office again, and kind of share that with for the good of the group.
Just remember, you're being watched.
And recorded.
Yeah, and recorded.
Christian.
All right. Well, on behalf of the commission, I would like to thank Kevin and Julie very much, and also Stefan tonight for their help and their assistance. And we'll see everybody at on the 27th in 2 weeks. And so let's see here. By unanimous consent at 6:56, we're adjourned. Good night.
Good night, everybody.